An elderly woman stood alone at the back of the military ceremony, invisible among the sea of decorated uniforms. At 65, with silver hair and weathered hands, she looked like someone's grandmother who'd wandered into the wrong event. Young officers brushed past her without a glance. Some smirked, others whispered. When the commanding general entered, the room snapped to attention, but his eyes found her immediately, without hesitation. He crossed the entire hall, stood before this frail-looking woman, and delivered the sharpest salute anyone had ever seen. The room froze. Confusion rippled through the ranks. Who was she? Why would a 4-star general salute a civilian? Then he spoke 3 words that shattered every assumption in that room. Semper Fi, Colonel. What happened next revealed a truth about heroism that most people never learn. Subscribe to hear the full story that'll change how you see courage forever. The Medal of Honor ceremony at Camp Pendleton was supposed to be perfect. Every detail had been rehearsed, every uniform inspected, every seat assigned with military precision. Flags hung motionless in the still California air. Cameras were positioned to capture history. Families filled the front rows, proud and tearful. And in the very back, standing alone near the equipment tent, was a woman nobody noticed. She was 65 years old, maybe older. Her silver hair was pulled back in a simple bun that belonged to a different era. She wore a plain navy dress, sensible shoes, and carried a small purse that looked like it had survived several decades. Her face was lined with deep creases, the kind that come from sun and wind and time. Her hands, resting calmly at her sides, were spotted with age, the skin thin and papery. She looked like someone's grandmother, like someone who'd gotten lost on the way to the commissary, like someone who didn't belong. A young Marine corporal nearly bumped into her while carrying folding chairs. He didn't apologize, didn't even seem to register she existed. He just sidestepped and kept moving, his focus on important people up front, the generals, the politicians, the medal recipients in their dress blues. Another officer, a captain with 3 rows of ribbons, walked past her to get a better camera angle. His shoulder brushed hers. He glanced back, annoyed, as if she were an obstacle. His eyes swept over her. Old woman, civilian clothes irrelevant, and dismissed her in less than a second. Near the podium, a group of junior officers stood in tight formation, their uniforms crisp, their bearing proud. One of them, a second lieutenant fresh from Quantico, gestured vaguely toward the back of the crowd. "Security's getting sloppy," he muttered to his companion. "Half the people back, they're probably wandered and off the street." His friend chuckled, probably looking for the bingo hall. They laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that assumes no one important is listening. The woman heard them. Her expression didn't change. She didn't stiffen, didn't frown, didn't react at all. She simply adjusted her purse strap with slow, deliberate fingers and turned her gaze toward the distant mountains. She had learned long ago that anger was a luxury she couldn't afford. That pride was weight she didn't need to carry. That being seen wasn't the same as being effective. A sergeant major walked past her, clipboard in hand, counting attendees. His eyes landed on her for a moment, his brow furrowed slightly, as if trying to place her. Then he shook his head and moved on. Probably a retiree's wife, he thought. Maybe a widow. The ceremony was about to begin. A Marine band assembled near the stage. Dignitaries took their seats. The families of the honored dead sat in the front rows, holding programs with trembling hands. Photographers crouched low, adjusting lenses, and the woman in the back remained standing, not because there weren't enough chairs, because she chose to. She stood the way she had always stood, balanced, centered, with a posture so precise it could have been measured with instruments. Her feet were shoulder-width apart, her weight evenly distributed. Her spine was straight but not rigid, strong but not aggressive. It was a stance of someone who had spent decades standing watch. No one noticed. A young private stumbled slightly as he walked past her, his cover slipping. He cursed under his breath, caught it, and glanced around to see if anyone had witnessed his clumsiness. His eyes passed right over the old woman. She might as well have been invisible. The Air Force liaison, a colonel with silver wings on his chest, took his seat near the front. He glanced back at the crowd, assessing the turnout. His gaze swept past the woman without pausing. Nothing there worth noting. The ceremony began with the national anthem. Everyone stood. The woman didn't place her hand over her heart the way civilians did. Instead, her right hand moved with muscle memory to a position just above her waist. Fingers together, palm down, a salute that was never completed, as if her body remembered something her clothes no longer showed. A few people near her noticed the odd gesture. Someone whispered, "Is she okay?" Probably confused, came the response. When the anthem ended and people sat, she remained standing. Not defiantly, not dramatically. She simply stayed on her feet, because standing through a ceremony like this was what she knew. It was what she had done for 40 years. The Commandant of the Marine Corps stepped to the podium, a 4-star general whose presence commanded immediate respect. His voice was strong, clear, filled with the weight of the moment. He spoke of sacrifice, of honor, of Marines who had given everything in service to their country. He spoke of battles fought in distant lands, of courage under fire, of the unbreakable bond between warriors. The woman listened. Her eyes were steady, unblinking, focused on something far beyond the stage. And then, mid-sentence, the general paused. His gaze had swept across the crowd in that practiced way leaders do, making eye contact, acknowledging presence. But when his eyes reached the back of the assembly, they stopped. Completely. His words trailed off. The microphone caught his sharp intake of breath. People in the front rows turned, confused, trying to see what had captured his attention. The general stared at the old woman in the back. His face went pale. Then his expression shifted through a series of rapid changes: shock, recognition, disbelief, and finally, something that looked like awe. Without a word, without explanation, he stepped away from the podium. The crowd murmured. Cameras swiveled, trying to track his movement. The sergeant major looked alarmed and started to move forward, but the general waved him off. General Marcus Kell walked down the center aisle with long, purposeful strides. He wasn't running, but he was moving faster than protocol suggested. His eyes never left the woman in the back. People parted. Whispers spread like wildfire. What's happening? Is something wrong? Who's he looking at? The general reached the back of the assembly. He stopped 3 feet from the old woman, close enough that she could see the moisture gathering at the corners of his eyes. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly and with absolute precision, General Marcus Kell came to attention. His spine straightened, his shoulders squared, his chin lifted, and he rendered the sharpest salute anyone in that crowd had ever seen. His hand snapped to his brow, fingers together, palm angled perfectly. The movement was crisp, respectful, and held without wavering. It wasn't the casual salute of a greeting. It was a salute reserved for heroes. The entire assembly fell silent, not the quiet of waiting, the silence of confusion bordering on shock. The old woman's eyes widened slightly. For the first time, emotion flickered across her face. Not pride, something deeper, something that looked like pain and gratitude mixed together. She returned the salute. Her movement was slower, her arm trembling slightly with age, but the form was flawless, textbook perfect, muscle memory from decades past. The general held his salute for 5 full seconds. Then he dropped his arm, stepped forward, and in front of the entire stunned assembly, he embraced her. "Semper Fi, Colonel," he said, his voice thick. The word Colonel echoed through the crowd like a thunderclap. People stood. Cameras zoomed in. The sergeant major's clipboard hit the ground. The woman's eyes closed. Her shoulders, which had been so perfectly straight, sagged slightly as if a weight she'd been carrying for years had suddenly shifted. "Semper Fi, Marcus," she whispered back. The general released her and stepped back, his composure returning. But his eyes were still bright with emotion. He turned to face the bewildered crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying across the assembly without need for a microphone, "many of you are wondering who this woman is." Silence. Absolute silence. Her name is Colonel Eleanor Graves, and she is the reason many of us are alive today. Confusion rippled through the crowd. A colonel? She wasn't in uniform. She wasn't on the program. She didn't look like... The general continued, his voice stronger now. In 1991, Colonel Graves led the most critical reconnaissance operation of Operation Desert Storm, an operation so classified it didn't officially exist. People leaned forward. The young lieutenant who joked about bingo halls felt his stomach drop. She and her team infiltrated 40 miles behind enemy lines, the general said. They provided targeting data that prevented a catastrophic ambush on advancing coalition forces. Intelligence estimates suggest her actions saved between 2,000 and 3,000 lives. Someone gasped. A photographer's camera clicked rapidly. She was awarded the Navy Cross. The general continued. But because the operation was classified, the ceremony was closed. No press, no public record, no recognition. The captain who brushed past her felt heat rising in his face. After Desert Storm, Colonel Graves continued to serve in intelligence and special operations, the general said. She trained 3 generations of Marine officers. She developed counterinsurgency protocols still used today. She served in Iraq, Afghanistan, and theaters I still can't name. The woman, Colonel Graves, stood silently, her face neutral, as if she were listening to someone else's story. She retired 8 years ago, the general said, quietly, without ceremony, without fanfare, because that's who she is. He turned to face her again. I was a lieutenant in 91, Colonel. You pulled me out of a burning vehicle during that operation. I had a sucking chest wound and no chance of survival. You carried me 2 miles through enemy territory. His voice broke slightly. I wouldn't be standing here without you. The crowd sat frozen. No one moved. No one breathed. The general's voice strengthened. And yet today, when she arrived at the ceremony, a ceremony honoring the very value she embodied for 40 years, not one person recognized her. Not one person offered her a seat. Not one person thanked her for her service. Shame settled over the assembly like a heavy blanket. The young officers who'd laughed felt their faces burning. The sergeant major who dismissed her as someone's wife looked at his boots. The captain who'd been annoyed by her presence wanted to disappear. The general looked around slowly, letting his gaze touch every face. Let this be a lesson, he said quietly. Heroism doesn't always look the way you expect it to. Courage doesn't always announce itself. Strength doesn't always fit the image in your head. He paused. Colonel Graves could have walked to the front of the ceremony. She could have worn her medals. She could have demanded recognition. But she didn't. She stood in the back, invisible, the same way she's operated her entire career. Not because she had to, because that's who she is. The general turned to her one more time. Colonel, would you please join me at the podium? Eleanor Graves shook her head slowly. That's not necessary, General. With respect, ma'am, he said. It is? She hesitated. Then, with the same deliberate movements, she walked forward. The crowd parted like water. Every single person, officers, enlisted, civilians, came to attention, and as she passed, one by one, they saluted. The young lieutenant's hand trembled as he raised it. The captain's eyes were wet. The sergeant major's salute was so sharp it could have cut glass. By the time Eleanor Graves reached the podium, every person in that assembly was standing at attention, hand to brow, rendering honors to a woman most of them had dismissed minutes earlier. She stopped beside the general, her small frame barely reaching his shoulder. She looked out at the sea of salutes, and for the first time, tears slipped down her weathered cheeks. Not from pride, from the weight of being seen after so many years of being invisible. The general spoke again, his voice gentle now. Colonel, is there anything you'd like to say? She was quiet for a long moment. Then she shook her head. Just this, she said, her voice soft but clear. The Marines I served with didn't need me to look like them. They needed me to show up when it mattered. That's all any of us can do. She looked at the young faces staring at her. Don't judge someone's value by what you can see, she said. Some of the strongest people I've known looked nothing like warriors. Some of the bravest wore no medals. Some of the most critical battles were fought by people whose names you'll never know. Her voice grew firmer. Your mission isn't to look like a hero. It's to be effective, to be disciplined, to be ready when no one else is. She paused. And to never, ever underestimate someone because they don't fit your expectations. The assembly remained frozen, absorbing every word. Eleanor Graves stepped back from the microphone. She looked at the general, nodded once, and turned to walk back to her place at the rear. But the general stopped her. "Ma'am," he said, "with your permission, I'd like to present you with something." He gestured. An aide approached carrying a wooden case. The general opened it carefully, revealing a medal inside, a purple heart that had somehow never made it into her official record. "This should have been yours 30 years ago," he said. Eleanor stared at it. Then she shook her head. "General, I didn't come here for that." "I know," he said, "but you're getting it anyway." He pinned it to her dress with careful hands. When he finished, he stepped back and saluted her one more time. This time, the entire assembly followed. Hundreds of hands rose in unison. Cameras captured the moment, and in the silence, someone started clapping. Then another person, then another. Within seconds, the applause was thunderous. Not polite ceremony applause, raw, powerful, grateful applause that shook the ground. Eleanor Graves stood at the front of the assembly, a 65-year-old woman, in a plain dress, surrounded by warriors half her age who finally understood what they'd almost missed. After the ceremony ended, people approached her carefully, respectfully. The young lieutenant who joked about her apologized with shaking voice. She smiled gently and told him it was all right. The captain who brushed past her asked if he could buy her coffee. She accepted. The sergeant major approached last. He stood at attention and said, "Ma'am, I failed you today." Eleanor looked at him with kind eyes. "No, Sergeant Major. You gave me exactly what I needed." "What's that, ma'am?" "A reminder," she said, "that the most important work is often the work no one sees." She left the ceremony the same way she'd arrived. Quietly, without fanfare, refusing offers of escort. She walked to her old sedan in the parking lot, got in, and drove away. But she left something behind. A question that every person at that ceremony would carry forward. How many people like her have I walked past without seeing? Moral: true strength doesn't demand recognition. Real courage doesn't announce itself. The most powerful people in any room are often the ones you don't notice, not because they're hiding, but because they've learned that effectiveness matters more than appearance. Never underestimate someone based on how they look, how old they are, or how quietly they carry themselves. The greatest warriors don't always wear their medals on the outside. Sometimes they wear them in their hearts, invisible to everyone except those wise enough to truly see. Respect isn't about rank. It's about recognizing the weight people carry that you can't see. If this story moved you, if it reminded you to look twice at the people you might otherwise dismiss, then please subscribe. These stories exist to honor the invisible warriors among us, the ones who serve without seeking recognition, who carry burdens we'll never know about, who change the world quietly while the rest of us aren't looking. Subscribe to keep their courage alive, because everyone deserves to be seen.